Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Who are you? What are you doing listening to me talking? I suppose you're here for another story. What makes you think that I want to entertain the likes of you? Well, I suppose you did click on the link. So I suppose I may as well tell you a story. I'm just going to warn you that this story is entirely made up. Its images and likenesses, no matter how accidental and similar to people, are accidental. You can see how made up this story is by the fact that it makes no sense. Now, when I say that it's made up, I mean exactly that. It's made up right now on the spot. And it's just the little musings of my imagination. I am totally sane. I feel that I must add that, because who knows what sort of monstrosities I may speak in this story. Are we sitting comfortably? Good, then I shall begin. Bang went the gun. Bang, 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 bang went all the guns. And that was how the war ended. It was a short war. It lasted only 3 days. And it became known forevermore as the War of Auntie Nellie's Sausages. Now, you might think it seems like a pretty strange reason to go to war over Auntie Nellie's sausages. But let me tell you this. Many a man had died before that to get the recipe of Auntie Nellie's sausages. Not least Auntie Nellie herself, who I have to correct myself and say that she wasn't a man, but she did die in the defense of her recipe. I'm afraid I cannot tell you what was in her sausages, because she never told me, but I do have it on good authority that Auntie Nellie loved a good bit of meat. So, the day after the war, it was peaceful and quiet, and all around was just a sense of slumber and relief that those terrible 3 days of war was over. It was hard to believe that 2.9 billion people died in those 3 days. Sorry. Sometimes I amuse myself. It was hard to believe that 2.9 billion people died in those 3 days, all over Auntie Nellie's sausages. But, you know, a killer recipe is a killer recipe is a killer. There was many graves to be dug, so I suppose at least the living had something to do to occupy their minds, i.e. bury the dead. Some people suggested just to take them onto a ship in the sea and to just blow up the ships in the middle of the ocean, and that way they would sink. But then, you know, the hand-wringers of society said that this would be terrible pollution. And other people said that maybe we should burn the bodies. And people said that would be terrible pollution. And some people said we should fly them in rockets up into space and jettison them out into the vacuum of space. And some people said that would be terrible pollution for space. So in the end, what they decided to do was to stop going to the people who cared about pollution. I think we can all agree that that was the best course of action. So time passed by, as it does, and things began to return to normal in the town of Brumshire, and all the people of Brumshire decided to change the name of the town to Dick, because they decided that Brumshire was too long a name, and that the person who invented the name was a bit of a dick to think of it in the first place. So they decided from that point on they would all be members of the town of Dick. Now, I think we can all agree that whenever the people voted to live in a place called Dick, they did not see the consequences of naming the town Dick. Of course, Dick was spelled D-Y-Y-C-I-K, with a silent I at the end. That, in case you were wondering if you want to write that down, it was D-Y-Y-C-I-K. I bet you thought I wouldn't remember that, didn't you? It seems to be a particular little thingy-majig trait of all these Ramble videos that you think I won't remember what I just said, but I'm very good at remembering such rubbish. The town Dick was spelled D-Y-Y-C-I-K. Yeah, I think so. So, all the people in the town had to change all their addresses, and they had to change all their settings and their eBay and Amazon mail delivery notices. Now, you might think that considering that 2.9 billion people had just died over Auntie Nellie's sausages recipe, that people might have better things to worry about than changing their name of their town to Dick. D-Y-Y-K-I. D-Y-Y-C-I-K. I'm confusing myself. But the more I confuse myself, the more sleepy you become. And the more I confuse you, the sleepy you become. And the more I say come, the more concerned you are in what I'm doing. So, where were we? Yes, the people of Pembrokenshire, Tongue, I can't remember, changed the name of their town to Dick. So, as much as the people loved Dick, they also loved cats. I think I will change the topic of this because this is really turning into a bit of a adult sort of topic here. Then again, according to YouTube, my analytics are more old man variety. I say, old chaps, how are you, old men? So, the people of Dick were all happy because they loved Dick, and they loved coming home at the end of a hard day's work to Dick. The men loved Dick, the women loved Dick, the animals loved Dick, and I can't mention the young people because that would get this video flagged. But they liked where they lived too. Believe me, they loved it. Dick was an area of green grass, fields and parks and forests. It was pretty city far away from where the nuclear and atomic bombs had went off. Hydrogen bombs is what I meant to say, because nuclear or atomic bombs. So, the forests and the green fields and the pastures were left untouched from the nuclear fallout. Some other parts of the world were totally ruined, as you can expect from the fact 2.9 billion people died. It was a pretty terrible 3-day war. I think you'd have to agree with me. But all the people in Dick seemed to suffer no more than just a few blocked noses and some sneezes. Of course, the planet became darker for a while. There was that much fallout. Is it fallout? There was that much dust. There's the word I was looking for. It's hard to remember sometimes little words such as dust. But there was dust and debris from the explosions that went up into the atmosphere, and the whole planet became darker and colder for a while. And the people said, this is causing too much pollution. And then the other people said, would you stop complaining about pollution? 2.9 billion people died. Why couldn't you have been amongst those? And the people who were against pollution said, that's not a very politically correct thing to say. So it was decided that all the people who cared about the pollution should have one big meeting. So they all went to the town of Dick. And when the people were in the town of Dick, D-Y-Y-C-I-K, the government decided to nuke the town. That way it would get rid of all the protesters, and it would wipe the town of Dick off the face of the earth. Because the leaders of the world, they were jealous of Dick. They wanted more to be like Dick. And you know how people act when they get jealous. They destroy the things they want the most. There was no more Dick. Dick was gone. So, I suppose you'd be wanting another story now. Well, after that happy little story, I don't blame you. A long time ago in Bethlehem, so the Holy Bible say, Mary's boy child Jesus Christ was born on a Christmas day. No, okay. Wrong time of year for that story. Let's see. Let's pick a letter from the alphabet. We'll pick the English alphabet because that's the one I know best. And we'll go for the letter G. Don't be saying to yourself that's what you were thinking too. You weren't. Stop telling lies to yourself. You're not impressing anybody. So there was a town called Glory. And Glory was a great, gorgeous place. And the people of Glory were all happy. And they lived happy lives. And they lived in happy houses. And things were just glorious in the town of Glory. Now the mayor of Glory was a man called George. Gorgeous George. Yes, that's right, that was his name. George. Gorgeous George. And what Gorgeous George liked most about the town of Glory was just how many things in the town began with the letter G. There was garages and gazebos and and there was some more carriages, and there was grass, and there was green doors, and there was lots of things beginning with G. If you don't believe me, go to a dictionary and look it up, and you will see how many there was. So gorgeous George. So George, gorgeous George. So good they named him 3 times. Was the mayor of Glory. And he was married to his wife, Georgina. Now, Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, had what you might call a bit of a mouthful for a name. And so people decided just to call her G. But then that got confusing with her husband, whose initials were also G, because he was George, gorgeous George, and she was Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George. So people weren't quite sure what to do. But they persevered and they figured it out. But that's a too small a story for this massive story I'm about to tell you. It all started one day when Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, woke up and found that the mayor, her husband, George, gorgeous George, was no longer in bed beside her. He had been in bed beside her whenever she fell asleep, and he had been in bed beside her when she woke up just 2 minutes before. But now he wasn't in bed beside her. She didn't feel him getting up. She didn't hear him getting up. He just seemed to have vanished. Gorgeous George was gone. And where George's gorgeous George and where George's and where George gorgeous George had gone to, she didn't know. Now she got up and she went into the bathroom and he wasn't there. And she went downstairs and he wasn't there either. And she went upstairs and he wasn't there either. Because they lived in a big house, because he was the mayor. So they had 3 stories. In case you're wondering why George, gorgeous George, and Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, had an upstairs and a downstairs. But maybe you have an upstairs and a downstairs as well as the floor you're on right now. Well, aren't you great? Don't you feel good for yourself? But anyway, I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to tell a story. Stop antagonizing the storyteller. Let me carry on. So, Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, couldn't find her husband, who I've told you before was called George, gorgeous George. Yeah, that was his name. Anyway, so she rang his secretary, who was called Tina Bobina Thumbelina, and Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, said, Tina Bobina Thumbelina, have you seen George, gorgeous George? And Tina Bobina Thumbelina said, good morning, Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George. No, I haven't seen George, gorgeous George. But he was meant to have an early meeting with the town planner, Harry Barry Bukhari. And Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, said to Tina Bubina Thumbelina, I didn't know that Harry Bucari, forgotten his name already, was in town. And Tina said, yes, Gorgeous George was to meet him this morning, because Harry Bucari is looking to build some houses in the land that used to be called Dick, Dyyck. And Gorgeous Georgina George said, but Tina Bubina Thumbelina, wasn't that place all nuked 100 years ago? And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, yes, Georgina, that is true. But according to Harry Bubari, the land is now nuclear radiation free, or at least low enough that people can live there. So Gorgeous George went to meet Harry Bucari for some brunch. And Gorgeous Georgina George said, but Tina Bubina Thumbelina, why wouldn't Gorgeous George have told me about it? And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, well, I don't know, I don't really want to say too much, but I think Gorgeous George was going to buy you a present. I think he was planning on maybe having a little holiday home built in the town of Dick, or as it's going to be renamed, New Dick. And Gorgeous Georgina George sighed, and she said, Tina Bubina Thumbelina, why would Gorgeous George think that I would want to live in a place that 100 years ago was nuked to shit, and 100,000 people were killed? And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said to Gorgeous Georgina George, well, you know that Gorgeous George sometimes has these little silly ideas. Well, I know he can be a bit whimsical, said Georgina. After all, he did hire someone called Tina Bubina Thumbelina. And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said to Georgina, well, Georgina, if you really must know, my real name is Peg, but Gorgeous George prefers to have girls working for him with rhyming names. And Georgina said, what do you mean, girls? I thought you were the only one. And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, no, there's also Sarah Bobara Malera, and there's also Lynn Win Malin, and Tristra Listra Bukistra. And Gorgeous Georgina George said to Tina Bubina Thumbelina, say those back to me again. And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, no, fuck off. Gorgeous Georgina Thumbelina. No, that's not her. Gorgeous Georgina George said, Tina Bubina Thumbelina, don't you swear at me. I'll get my husband to fire you. And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, don't be an old tight, you sour-faced bitch. And Georgina was shocked. No one had ever spoken to the mayoress like that. She said, I'm going to come down there. I'm going to come down to the office. And I'm going to fight you, MMA style. And Tina Bubina Thumbelina said, well, you may bring it, bitch, because I'm going to tear your head off. And just at that moment, Gorgeous George came in through the door, and he heard a commotion. And he came into the room where his wife was, I haven't decided where she is, or I can't remember, so you make it up. And he said to her, Georgina, gorgeous Georgina, George, what are you doing? Who are you arguing with? And Georgina says, I'm arguing with your bitch of a receptionist, Peg. And George shuddered, and he said, I really would wish if you prefer to call her Tina Bobina Thumbelina. And Georgina said, Why? Why do you like these rhyming names, you nut job? Are you having an affair with her? And George says, No, of course not. Sure, Tina's 75 years old. And Georgina said, What's age got to do with it? Does that imply that if she was 30 years younger you would, or 40 years younger, or 50 years younger? And George says, No, no, no. I love my wee Georgina. You're the only woman for me. And Georgina gave him a bad look. You know the bad look that you see every day. That sort of bad look, that's the look she gave him. And George says, What are you arguing about anyway? And Georgina said, Well, according to Peg, you're planning on moving me to the town of Dick, or New Dick. And George says, Well, it was going to be a surprise, because the government are going to declare the zone entirely radiation free. So pretty soon the cost of land's going to go way up. So I was going to go in and get it for cheap. You know, a bit of a mayoral perk. And I was going to buy this land around a small lake and build a large house for just you and me, for whenever I stop being mayor. Somewhere for us to retire to. And Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, looked at George, gorgeous George. And she said, Oh, G. You always know just the right thing to say to stop me being a crazy owl witch. And G said to G. I love you, G. Don't you listen to Tina Bobina Thumbelina. She's just jealous, because she wants me, but I only want you. And Georgina, gorgeous Georgina George, gave her husband a big hug and a kiss. And then 1 year later, they moved into their new house in New Dick. And they lived happily ever after. But Tina Bobina Thumbelina was sent to Siberia for being a bad girl. The